So many cooks in the kitchen, so many recipes to share. So many cooks in the kitchen with meals for you to prepare. We've got fruits and grains, veggies and beans, more healthy food than you've ever seen. So many cooks in the kitchen, plant-based meals to prepare. So many cooks in the kitchen with ideas we're happy to share.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our show, our So Many Cooks in the Kitchen show, so many holiday desserts. I'm excited to be with you today. I've been prepping some ingredients. So we're a group of Food for Life instructors. Food for Life is a nutrition education program of the Physicians Committee. We're a group of several hundred people around the world. Our group, So Many Cooks in the Kitchen, is about 24 folks, and we love plant-based nutrition and plant-based food preparation. So the holidays are upon us. There's quite a few holidays coming up. There's some Hanukkah's coming up, Christmas, Diwali just passed. I think Eid passed, Kwanzaa. There's a lot of holidays. And yesterday, my daughter, I teach math, and my daughter also likes math, and she took this paper folding class, and she made a surprise, which is going to be part of our dish today. So it says yummy on it. We'll find out in a few minutes what she made. So I'm going to be making a fruit compote. Today we have 8 of us instructors. We'll spend about 10 minutes each, starting with my kitchen. We'll go around kitchen to kitchen, and each of us will make some healthy, vegan, whole food, plant-based dishes. The holidays, a lot of times people think of decadence, but you don't have to be unhealthy to be decadent. I don't know if you can see my beautiful layout here. My daughter is running the camera, so maybe if you tip the camera a tiny bit, look at all the wonderful ingredients we have. So with a very small exception, which we'll see at the end, there's no added sugar. It's all fruit-based. So I'm going to be making a compote. Compote is an interesting dish. It was, in medieval times, it was believed falsely that cooking fruits in sugar water actually increased their nutritive property. You don't need sugar water to enjoy the wonderful benefits of fruit. Fruit is sweet, but it's full of fiber and it's full of water as well. It is basically rate limiting because of the water and because of the fiber. You won't overeat. You can enjoy your fruits. So what I did while I was waiting at the beginning is I took a navel orange and I left a little bit of the skin. And I just roughly cut the flesh from the skin. Sometimes I like using the flesh. We buy organic as much as possible. This is organic. So if you're using an organic citrus, you can zest it. But I thought I would leave that for a different show because this dish, sometimes because it has cranberries, I think the zest will overpower this dish. But I could have zested it. Instead, I'm going to compost this. So I'm just going to leave this over here. So what I've done is I've taken my orange, and I mentioned in the recipe, and all the recipes are available. We'll post the recipe link. If this citrus had seeds, I would have removed the seeds. This is a navel orange, and it was seedless. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it in my pan. Isn't that neat, cooking fruit? And then I'm going to be using cranberries. I love cranberries. In our last show, So Many Thanksgiving Dishes, Karen Osborne, who's going to be presenting today as well, she inspired me to work with cranberries. I love these cranberries. A lot of people find cranberries tart. I actually enjoy popping these in my mouth and enjoying them. My daughter does too, and so does my wife. They're quite nice. So what we're going to do with the cranberries, they're high in antioxidants. They're a great food. So what we're going to do is I'm going to briefly blend the cranberries. These are fresh, organic, and in fact, they're biodynamic, which is even better than organic. So I'm going to put them in my Vitamix, in my blender, and I'm going to do a quick pulse chop. All the quantities are in the recipe. I think I used a half cup. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick pulse. And that's it. So you can see, where's my, here we go. So there's the cranberry. So I'm going to add the cranberry to my pan. By the way, this is our show about holiday desserts, next week we have a group called So Many Kids in the Kitchen, and several of our kids will be presenting their own holiday desserts. Okay, so there's the cranberry. Okay. And I'm going to be blending one more thing, so I'm not going to bother totally cleaning the blender. Okay. Then I'm going to also chop an apple. I'm really excited because nowadays at my co-op, we're getting this wonderful organic apple called sugar bee apple. It's so tasty. It feels like it's dripping with sugar water. And what you can do is you can chop the apple into maybe quarter or slightly smaller inch cubes. But what I'm going to do, especially since I have the blender out, is I'm simply going to do a rough chop and I'm going to put it in the blender. Now, a compote to me means cooked fruit. In the old days, or actually even today in France, I believe, compote is usually pureed. So it would be like an applesauce. But I like chunks. Okay, so I'm going to just be lazy, do a couple quick cuts, and throw it in my blender. And I didn't rinse the blender, but it's all the same ingredients. A little more cranberry will come out, and that's fine. These sugar bee apples are wonderful. You can use any apple you want. Pink ladies are great. I would stay away from sour apples like Granny Smith. Fuji is good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick blend of this. Now, you don't need any fancy blenders. I have a high-powered blender called the Vitamix. You could use any blender. And that's it. So you can see. Just be careful with blenders. Don't put metallic objects in blenders. I have a special plastic spatula. We generally don't like using plastic, but for a few things, plastic is great, including spatula like this. So I'm going to put the apple in here. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and start heating the pan. For now, I just put the blender on the side. One hint with cooking with blenders is rinse them pretty quickly after using them, and they're easier to clean. Okay. And then I'm going to add some blueberries. So this is 3/4 cup of blueberries. They're frozen, so I've had them out for half an hour. Okay. You don't have to defrost them because they'll warm up pretty quickly. So there go the blueberries. Okay, there go the blueberries. And then I'm going to put some raisins in. Now, one thing about raisins is try to buy unsulfured raisins. And generally, you should be able to find organic unsulfured raisins. I'm going to add some ginger. So ginger is a wonderful food to use. It has anti-inflammatory properties. It's great for digestion. So those of you who get car sick or air sick, try taking some ginger, chewing on some ginger. Neil Barnard, who started the Physicians Committee, wrote a book called Foods That Fight Pain. And I read that many years ago, and I remember being quite impressed with ginger because he wrote about so many properties of ginger that are healthy. So there goes the ginger. I'll tell you a funny thing about ginger. Some of you may say ginger is kind of a strong flavor. So I have a just turned 12-year-old daughter, and she generally doesn't like ginger. But she helped me fine-tune this recipe, and I put less ginger in, and she said, "Daddy, you can add more ginger." And so I actually added more, and she really loves the ginger, and she normally doesn't. Now, we added raisins. I couldn't resist, but we were able to get some cotton candy organic grapes. This is a relatively new variety of grape, which is so sweet, it tastes like cotton candy. So all I did is I threw some extra grapes in, and I cut them in half. So these go in there. Okay. And then, and by the way, I talked about the kids program. We're so thankful to Cody, whom we're going to see later. She and her children sent this to us. These beautiful, aren't these the most beautiful measuring spoons that you've seen? So Anu's going to be using that in her cooking show, my daughter, next week. We're going to add some cinnamon. You can use a cinnamon stick. Cinnamon stick gives a subtle cinnamon flavor. So I usually prefer ground cinnamon. So I'm going to put ground cinnamon in. I started with a ½ teaspoon. My daughter said, crank it up. So it's a teaspoon of cinnamon. The nice thing about cinnamon is it tastes sweet, but it turns out it reduces the glycemic load. It reduces how quickly sugar gets into your bloodstream. So adding cinnamon is a great food to add. Okay, so I've added the cinnamon. If you love cinnamon, you can add more. But to be honest, even with a teaspoon of cinnamon, we hardly taste the cinnamon. One other comment about ginger is you could also use candied ginger. Okay, and we use this once in a while, but you can see it has crystallized sugar on it. And really, this dish doesn't need extra sweetener, but if you really have a sweet tooth, you can use this. We're not going to use it, and my dish really has no refined sugars, okay? And that's all we're gonna do. So I'm going to stir it a bit, and my ingredients, my recipe says cook for a couple minutes until the orange has cooked down, which it has. I don't know if you can tell, but the orange is kind of cooked down, okay? And then the next step is I'm going to cover it. I'm going to reduce the heat to low. I'm going to let it cook for a couple minutes. And really, it's up to you. I'm going to stop after a minute in the interest of time. Oh, and I forgot, cloves. Okay, so I have, I think, 6 cloves. I'm going to throw the cloves in as well. Let's mix them in. Cloves add a nice, almost, well, we're used to cloves and orange around the holidays. But it also adds kind of a nice, almost, a nice spicy flavor to your compote. So at home, what you can do is you can let that cook for 5, 6, 10 minutes. The more you cook, it'll cook down more. And I would watch it every minute or two. I'd stir it a little bit. If you feel it's getting a little bit dry, add a little bit of fruit juice or a little bit more orange pieces would be good. And then when you're done, I'm going to go ahead and serve it. There'll still be some texture to the fruit. And generally, I like it to be less textured, but I'm going to ask my daughter to come and we're going to reveal her secret ingredient. So there's no reason we can't serve it now. As I said, if you let it cook down, it'll be even better. The orange will break down a little bit more. And how does that look? Does that look beautiful? So what we're going to do is, Anu, please join us. Bring your bowl. I'm going to give you a small serving, and in a few minutes, you can help yourself to some more. It's all cooked down very nicely. So what we're going to do is we're going to add, you can see there's some liquid in there. We're going to add a few shakes of cocoa. So here's some cocoa powder, just to give a little taste of chocolate. Okay, and then I forgot to add the vanilla. I'm not going to add it to the pan because I'm going to let the pan heat a little bit more. You usually want to add the vanilla at the very end, but I'll give you a tiny bit of vanilla in your serving.
Can I have another piece of orange?
Yes, you can. Help yourself. And let's reveal a new secret. So she made this wonderful box that says yummy, nice holiday colors, and there's snowflakes on it, she tells me. So let's see what your secret is. So you can put a tablespoon of chocolate chips for 4 servings. So I'm going to add a quarter of that, just a few chocolate chips on top. And there you go, winter fruit compote. And the last thing I'll say, while you sample, then we'll ask you what you think of it. So when you buy chocolate chips, it's very easy to find vegan chocolate chips. Now, chocolate chips aren't the healthiest food, but what's life without chocolate? So we used a very, very small quantity of chocolate chips. You want to watch for it. This is one brand we like. This is Equal Exchange. We like it not just because it's vegan, but also it's fair trade. Some chocolate exploits children. So young children are out working in chocolate fields, which isn't fun. The idea sounds good if, Charlie in the chocolate factory, working in a chocolate factory, but it's hard labor and children shouldn't be doing that. And so they're fair trade. And if you look at their ingredients, the ingredients here, the first ingredient is, I should ask my daughter to read this because her eyes are a lot better than mine. But the first ingredient is organic chocolate liquor, organic raw cane sugar. So it does have some sugar, but it's not the first ingredient. Organic cocoa butter. Cocoa butter is vegan, and organic cocoa powder, just more powder. And that's it. So this does have a little bit of sugar, but we're using such a small quantity. And you don't have to use the chocolate. One more thought is we love this dish as is. If your family has a sweet tooth, add some dates, chop some dates. You can put them in there. If you want, you can put a teeny bit of maple syrup. So tell us, how is the compote? And what does that mean?
It means more than great.
Yeah, very good. Is it as good as the last batch we made? Great, because I added more grapes this time. So with that, we move on to Janen Orhan. She has a surprise chestnut dish. She's going to be making that and joining us from Italy. Take it away, Janin.
Thank you, Dylan. That was wonderful. I like all the fruits you used. I'm going to try that one at home. Hi, everybody, and welcome to my kitchen in Alamandrana, Italy. This evening, I will be talking about chocolates and chestnuts. And who doesn't like chocolate and who doesn't like chestnuts? Well, anyways, I love them both. I will be making a very easy chocolate sauce, which hardens to a nice creamy consistency, but it's that you can spoon out basically. I have about 117 grams. I like to use a Lind 78%, but it's up to your pleasure to use sweeter or even darker chocolate. I think this just gives the perfect blend of a bitter chocolate, but with some sweetness. And it's just a cup of coconut milk. You add it to your double boiler. You melt both of them in the double boiler and whisk it nicely till it becomes very creamy. I have a little double boiler here, which is meant for the task. But if you don't have one at home, you don't have to worry. You can have just 2 pans that can fit into each other. Put a little bit of water in the bottom one and get it warm. And on the top one, you can achieve the same results as what I'm doing. And while this chocolate is melting here, I'm going to go to the other part of my dessert, which is the chestnut puree. I have about 2 cups of chestnuts that have been pureed in the food processor using the metal S blade, and just 2 tablespoons of really dark brown sugar, about 1/3 of a cup of water, and just a little bit of vanilla powder. I don't know in which form you find it. Mine in Italy comes in these tiny little packs. They're 1 gram, but I use 1/4 of a teaspoon in this recipe. So you whiz it till it's very nice and creamy, and add the water gradually so you don't overdo it. It becomes sort of a putty, just like when we were kids and playing with putty. So please prepare them ahead of time. It helps with the process, because here's the chocolate is melting here together with the coconut milk. Give it a nice whisk every now and then so it becomes creamy, creamy, creamy. And then go back to your chestnuts. Take about a tablespoon each and roll them in your hand and put them in the middle. Now this dessert is called marron déguisé, which means disguised chestnuts. And it's a childhood favorite of mine. It used to be a small chocolate that you could, a bite-sized chocolate, sort of like a Hershey's Kiss size thing. And in the middle was chestnut puree. I can't find it here in Italy. Therefore, I decided to make my own, and I'm making them slightly larger and serving them as dessert. And I called it my chestnut surprise, because when the chocolate sauce is all ready, and this is ready, you keep whisking it so it doesn't coagulate and stays creamy. And then you take it off the heat for a bit and continue whisking it. And when it's nice and creamy, you can see that it's a lovely consistency. You just stop. This is a perfect one for my husband to clean afterwards. I will put it on the side. It's his treat for helping me. And then this wonderful, amazing chocolate sauce, you basically take just about a big tablespoon and pour it over your prepared chestnuts. Just spoon it over. So now your chestnut is disguised. and it's just scrumptious. And the good news is with this recipe, you basically have 3 desserts. You can use the chestnut puree on its own later on in the show, our friend and colleague Mark will talk all about Aquafaba and wonderful goodies that you can do with it. So if you learn from Mark how to make Aquafaba whipped cream, the chestnut puree will go just beautifully with it. And here you go, I'm covering my chestnut purees. They're being disguised. So true to its name, it becomes marron déguisé. So there you go. Now you see them, now you don't. The chestnuts are all hidden. There's just a tiny bit left for the hardworking people in the kitchen to taste later. So I put this all, and then this goes in the fridge. Just about 2 hours later, it will be hard enough. And earlier today, I made another batch. Sorry, I just should also clarify that the batch I've made just now is a half of the recipe I used earlier. So the other half is here. They're in muffin liners, cupcake liners. You just take one at a time and don't show your guests, but here's the chestnut underneath, the disguised chestnut. You put it on a plate. And here I have my powdered pistachio. I do the powder in a coffee grinder, so you can nicely sprinkle it on. It becomes beautifully, the green and the dark chocolate is just wonderful. And then when you bite into it, of course, you get to the chestnut surprise. And the taste of the wonderful chestnut puree covered with the bitter chocolate and then the little bit of pistachio, powdered pistachio is just really, really lovely. Now, this is also not so, let's say it's decadent and very, very chocolatey. These chocolate desserts, they look tiny, but don't be fooled. They're really hearty and lusciously chocolatey. And the chestnut puree is just perfect. And chestnuts are almost a superfood for me. They're really low in glycemic index. They're deliciously sweet on their own, but in this dessert we put a little bit. Chestnuts are also very high in B vitamins, high in minerals. So in the winter months, they're a wonderful food to eat. And they bring back childhood memories for me because on the street corners, we used to have chestnuts roasting, and it's very, very reminiscent of winter months and my childhood. So this is it from me, everybody. For the recipe, please remember, go to the recipes document on Facebook. All our secrets are shared there. So this is an easy dessert. And before I go away, I say, please do try this at home. It's a wonderful thing to try. And I hand over the show to my Food for Life training classmate and roommate, Karen Osborne from Austin, Texas. Take it away, Karen. And bye, everybody. Arrivederci from Alamandrana.
Thanks, John, and that looks delicious. And I am Karen Osborne, as you said, myfoodfitnessandfun.com. My recipe today is going to be fun. It is messy. You want to get your kids involved, they'll love it. So what I've done is healthify a recipe that I had as a child. My mother used to make these beautiful trays of cookies at Christmas time to give as gifts. And this recipe was the centerpiece. So you can make 1 or 2 batches of this and give them away little by little on each tray. You can make a whole bunch of them and put them on your dessert table for your celebration. And it's not hard. It is fun, but it's a little bit messy. So let's get started. I'm going to tell you how I healthify it as we go with all of the ingredients. It was a cherry, one of those candy cherries with the red dye number, whatever. And then it had like a brownie kind of batter over it, which was made with the chocolate cookie wafers with the white flour and everything, probably butter. And then it's coated in chocolate by dipping it in the dairy chocolate chips. So you can probably imagine how I've changed the recipe up. And then it was coated with colored coconut with the chemically dyed, well, the food coloring. So we're gonna get started. I'm gonna make the batter first so I can get the food processor out of the way. And instead of cookie crumbs, I have oats, which have a lot of fiber, help with your digestion. They can help lower your cholesterol and regulate your blood sugar. And I always get organic oats because the conventional oats are usually dried with glyphosate before they store them. Then I'm going to put some dates. So instead of white sugar, which lowers your immune system, the dates have fiber and vitamins and minerals that help you use the sugar that's in the dates. And they're going to help hold the oats together in like a dough. And then, like John and I have chestnuts from Italy. And unlike other nuts, they are low in fat, high in fiber, and they're a little bit sweet, so it lets us not use so many dates, even though they are healthy. It just cuts down a little bit on the sugar. And what it's going to do is help make a cakey texture with this. I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla to make it taste good. Not that it doesn't already. And then we're just going to, well, I'm going to add a little bit of salt. If you're not using salt, it's great without it. It's about 1/8 of a teaspoon, and it just kind of brings out the sweetness. So I'm going to run the food processor until it starts sticking together. And then while the food processor is running, I'm going to add cacao powder. So this is going to give it the chocolate flavor. It's raw, so it's not very processed. It's not heated, so the antioxidants are still there. But I'm going to put it in while the food processor is running so it gets evenly dispersed. And then while it's running, I'm just going to add a little bit of water, because you want it dry like a cake, but you want it pliable enough to roll into balls. So I'm going to turn the food processor on and start adding things. All right, so I'm just going to check it and see if it's starting to hold together, which it is. It's nice and cakey. It holds together. And I'm going to add the water because it's a little dry. We're going to just turn it back on and pour the water in so we don't have like one soggy spot and one dry spot. So you could see, I think, that it kind of changed texture as it was spinning around, and it's very nice. Okay, so I'm going to move the food processor out of the way. And I have thawed out frozen cherries. If you have fresh cherries, that's great. I thaw them out on a paper towel to get rid of some of the moisture. So the smallest amount that I have seen in the stores is a 10-ounce bag. That's why the recipe calls for a 10-ounce bag. We're not going to use the whole thing. You need the extra to eat while you're working. You can double this recipe and probably use the whole bag. All right, so what I'm going to do is take a couple of tablespoons of dough. And I'm going to lower the screen in just a second. So I'm going to roll it into a ball. And then I'm going to just place my thumb in the center and just kind of hollow it out in the middle. Being careful not to go all the way through the bottom. And then I'm just going to drop a cherry in the center and kind of pinch the hole closed. Form it back into a ball. And I'm going to do one or two more real quick. So I got another couple of tablespoons of the batter. So I told you it's messy, but it cleans up really fast with some hot water. All right. So I have nice round shape. Hollow it out. And place another cherry on in the middle. All right. And I'm not going to make you watch me do all 18, but come back at the end and I'll have them all done. All right, so we have another fun part here. I have a cup of coconut divided, so half a cup in each jar. And then let's dry this off a little bit. Instead of the red dyed, what is it, number 40 or whatever, we're going to use beetroot powder. I've done it with the just raspberries, the freeze-dried raspberries, and then I powdered them in a coffee grinder. And I'm going to take a teaspoon of the beet powder and put it into one of the jars of coconut. And then, so the beet powder, the pigment is really, it's good for you. It's like got antioxidants, it's anti-inflammatory, it helps with the face to liver detox. So why not have something good for you instead of a chemical dye, right? And then for the green, I'm using a teaspoon of chlorella powder. Well, you could use spinach powder, you could use spirulina, but the chlorella I think is more of a neutral flavor than the spirulina. But in all of this, you're really just going to taste the chocolate. So it's, you know, anything you have, you can use. But the chlorella, it helps you break down the toxins and eliminate them from your body. So then we're just going to put the lid on the jars and shake them. Kids would like to do this. So if you want to make it darker, you can use more of the powder. If you want to do this for Valentine's Day, you could put the whole cup of coconut in one jar and use the 2 teaspoons of the beet powder. So now we have our red and green coconut. And then what I have in here is just a little bit of vegan chocolate chips. And there are also sugar-free chocolate chip. You just use whatever vegan chips you like. And then I've melted them. If you have a double boiler, that's great. Have a pot of water with another pot on top is what I'm doing. You want to just use a little, make a thin layer of the chocolate coating. And I recommend if you're right-handed, use your left hand. And because after you do 18 of these, one hand is going to be chocolate. So we're just going to dip this in. Now this gives it a little bit of fat, but if you use just a really thin layer, and the amount that's in the recipe, I figured out that it adds 1 gram of fat to the cookies, to each cookie. And it's a holiday treat. It's not like you're going to eat it all the time. So you've got a little chocolate, and drop it in the jar and shake it around until it's coated. And then you can use your hand or some tongs and just put it on a plate or on a piece of parchment paper or one of those silicone mats. When it cools, it lifts off really easily. So you want to keep these in the refrigerator for the cherries until you serve them. So we've got a light layer of chocolate, and we're going to drop it in the red. Shake it around until it's coated. And then when they get hard, you have this like chocolate cake with a cherry in the center and the hard chocolate coating on the outside, and it is just delicious. So happy holidays. And now we're gonna go to Cody Stubbe in Omaha, Nebraska, and she'll be making some delicious fudge. Take it away, Cody.
Hey Karen, thank you. Oh my gosh, that chocolate cherry burst, those look amazing, and I bet my kids would love to make those. So I'm gonna put that on my list to do sometime really soon for the holidays. So welcome everybody, happy holiday. This is just such a fun time of year for us. We get kind of festive around here. As you can see, we like to decorate. The girls wanted to put out this little nutcracker. He's kind of a fun guy. So anyway, well, welcome to Omaha, Nebraska. I'm Cody Stubbe, and I'm a Food for Life instructor. And I was in Karen and John's class for Food for Life instructors. So it's always great to work with them again. And so I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for about 18 years in the Omaha and Lincoln area, and been a nurse and instructor as well. And I love to cook, I love to eat healthy, and I love to teach Food for Life classes to teach others how you can prevent and reverse chronic disease through nutrition. So anyway, welcome. So I'm gonna make a healthy fudge, and I got this recipe from a website called Feasting on Fruit. And I made this recipe a few days ago just to try it out and see what we thought of it, and we all loved it and everything. But the thing was, is I make one little change to it. Instead of putting the pretzels on it, which I have in my recipe, my notes there, I would probably maybe just not do the pretzels, or maybe just have them only on top to sprinkle, because when they set inside, they did get a little bit soft. And so I'd say either just omit the pretzels or just put them on top. And then if you want to incorporate something throughout the fudge, you could use just a different kind of nut. So I did pecans for this, but walnuts also work great. And this is, a healthy fudge because we're replacing some of that fat with like coconut milk, so dairy-free. And we're also using dates as our sweetener. So it's pretty awesome. And I love dates. And I've done other shows about dates. So dates are so healthy for you. You get all sorts of vitamins and minerals with dates, and a bunch of fiber. So you don't have that glycemic index go up high. So, and actually the sugar absorbs slower in your GI system. So dates are wonderful. Okay. So what I have here, I have 1 cup of dates, and they're pitted. I put them in warm water for about 10 minutes, and that softened them up. Okay, and I'm going to put that in this little guy. Now it's just some type of high-speed blender. I originally did it my Vitamix, but it was kind of a small amount that it kind of just spurted everywhere, and I had to really push it down a lot. So I wanted to try out this little guy here. It's a little bit better, smaller device. I'm gonna do today. You're just gonna dump them in there, about 1 cup's worth. And I could just eat dates plain. The kids and I, we just snack on them. All right, and then we have 2/3 cup of coconut milk. And what I usually do with that is I will take the can of coconut milk, and it's just room temperature. And this is before I open it, and I shake it up really well. Some recipes call for like the coconut cream, which is where the thicker stuff is on top. That's what they want. But this is like the whole thing with the coconut milk where you shake it up, because otherwise it's going to be kind of chunky. So shake it really good and then open it up and then pour out what you need. Okay, that works really nice. All right, so I got my dates and my coconut milk in here. I'm just going to put the lid on tight here. Sorry, it might get loud for a second. Okay, now I'm not going to do that the whole time because it's going to take a little bit to do, because you want it really nice and smooth as you can. So it's probably going to take a little bit of time here. So I have one that I've already done. It's nice and creamy and smooth. I take it here. You can see that looks really good. I put that in my bowl. I love making fudge. Making fudge and eating fudge, it reminds me of my grandmother. So I always think of her. All right, so we got that in our bowl. Now we're going to add in some melted unsweetened chocolate. So we do the vegan chocolate chips. And there is a little sugar in the variety of the chips that I got, and that's okay. You know, these are desserts, so they're going to have probably a little bit of sugar in them. So, but they're all dairy free, animal product free. Okay. Otherwise, this is just dark chocolate. Okay. So I'm going to stir that in. Now I tend to heat mine up in the microwave in small increments. Just, you don't want it to burn. So I usually start off with like 25 seconds, stir it, and then maybe 25 seconds, stir it again, and then maybe another 15 seconds. It kind of just depends on how, like, your strength of your microwave. So just be really careful with that, or you can use a double boiler, which I believe Karen had done in the previous. All right, so we're going to add that in here. We're also going to add in 1/2 cup of cocoa powder. All right. Just want to mix it real nice. It is going to start getting kind of thick on you. Now you can put the nuts in now if you want, or you can just sprinkle them on top. Whoop. Kind of getting it out, aren't I? That's the thing with that cocoa powder. It just gets everywhere. And the girls like making this kind of stuff. Oh, it smells so good. When you heat up chocolate, oh my goodness, it makes the whole kitchen smell great. All right, so there you go. All right, now this is kind of a small batch. You might have to double it, because let me tell you, the small batch goes pretty quick around here. So for the small batch, I'm just going to use this little glass container. Get it all in there. My kids can't wait for this. Saturday nights, we have our game night around our house. And so it'll be ready just in time for that. Probably just needs to sit in your fridge probably about like 4 to 5 hours. So it gets cold all the way through. So I'm just spreading this out nice and flat. It's going to make a nice little batch here. All right. I'm sure the girls will want to lick my spoons here and bowls. We'll just sprinkle all these lovely little bits of chopped up pecans. All right, just kind of push them down so they stay there. Perfect. All right, there we go. So I'm going to be putting this in the fridge. We're going to have it tonight. I'm so excited. I did have 3 pieces left over from my last batch that I want to show you guys. That turned out really well. And so if you can see this here, it goes nice with a side of strawberries. And of course, we love mint in our house. The girls will just go around and eat it, and it's high in antioxidants, so I'm like, go for it. But it always just looks so pretty. So this is the one that had the pretzels on the inside, so it is a little bit softer. So I would just suggest omitting the pretzels or putting them on top. So here you go, everybody. This is healthy fudge, vegan healthy fudge. I hope you give it a shot. You're gonna love it. It's delicious. It's gonna satisfy that chocolate craving that you have. Thank you for joining me in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm gonna pass it over now to Angelita in Greenville, South Carolina. Take it away, Angelita.
Thank you, Cody. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I have everything at my house that I need to make that fudge, and I definitely will be making it this evening. What I'm going to prepare for you guys is called Capirutada, which is a Mexican bread pudding. And this is something that my mom made, my grandma made. Just about every region of Mexico has their own version of it. What it consists of is dried bread. You can dry it overnight. What I did, because I didn't have enough time to do all that, was I put it in my air fryer and bake at 300 for about 15 minutes, and it dried it up beautifully. So the recipe is in the link. So what I have is 6 cups of bread, and you can use any bread that you like, just as long as it's not a savory bread. You can use gluten-free bread in this recipe as well. And you're going to need 3/4 cups each of toasted pecans and toasted walnuts. And again, you can substitute whatever nuts that you like. Some people like almonds. The traditional way that my mom would make it and my grandma is they would use peanuts, but I'm not too big on peanuts. And I'm using a cup of raisins and a cup of diced apples. But unfortunately, my son ate the apples, so I'm substituting cranberries. And that's the beauty of this recipe, is you can substitute different things that, you know, at your home. So you also are going to need 3 cups of plant-based milk. Now, the traditional way is they use water and they infuse it with the cinnamon and the anise and the cloves. But they also use some egg. So I'm using the plant-based milk to make it a little bit creamier. So what you do is you just take an oven-proof dish and you pour half of your bread in there. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna do 2 layers. So you pour half of that in there. And I've already have my items. I've got 2 separate bowls. So it makes it a lot easier for it to go on there. And you just distribute it evenly. And if you have OCD, I mean, you're more than welcome to arrange everything the way you like, but I like being surprised of what comes into the bite that I take. And I infuse the milk with the cinnamon sticks, with the anise, and with the cloves, and I let it simmer for about 5 minutes. Then I strained it, but because I crushed the cinnamon sticks in there, there's still a little bit of cinnamon in there. So then I use another sieve just to make sure that I catch anything in there. And you're gonna pour half that milk in there. Then you're gonna go with your second layer. And cinnamon, cloves, and anise are all 3 of them help with digestive problems. They help lower blood sugar. They may help lower blood pressure. I know when I've got a little bit of a stomach ache, I make a tea out of that just with water and sweeten it with a little bit of maple syrup. And I sip on that, and that really just calms everything down. When I was young, excuse me, still living at home, I used to have a lot of stomach issues, and my mom would make me cinnamon tea, and it always helped. And here I am at my age with grown children, and I'm still needing that comfort of that cinnamon tea to help me when I'm having those problems. But cinnamon to me is sweet in itself, so I really don't like to use anything to sweeten it. So here is the other ones. We're going to layer that on top. And the pecans and the walnuts also have good fats in there, magnesium, potassium, and so those are good for you as well. So really, this is a very healthy dessert. I used raw cane sugar, 1 cup, when I was simmering all this, when I was, well, infusing the milk with all the spices. And then, so here we go, we're distributing it all around. And then we're gonna top this with a sweet cashew cheese that I made in the recipe. Is going to be on the link. Okay, so you're gonna add 1 cup, and you're gonna put this on top, and you're gonna put it in the oven at 350 for about 20-30 minutes. But the thing is, you can also eat this without putting it in the oven. Some people just like to put the hot milk in there. They don't let the milk cool. They put the hot milk in there, and then they put the topping, let it sit, everything gets absorbed, maybe 2 hours, and then you can serve it that way. And you put a coconut cream on top of it, or you can use the whipped coconut cream on top, or if you're really feeling daring, you can add a scoop of plant-based ice cream on top of that, and of course drizzle a little bit of chocolate, and it's just absolutely amazing. So you just take that sauce and pour it over the top. And the recipe calls for 1 cup, and that gives you a nice thin layer. But it's a holiday, and so I'm using 2 cups. But again, it's up to you, because you're not going to eat this every day. And why not just enjoy it? Share it with your family. Take it to a neighbor. It's absolutely, absolutely wonderful. So this is what it looks like when you've got it all covered. And then this cheese sauce also, you can use it as a dip for fruit, or you can also use it to put on top of waffles. So there's so many uses for this. And this is what it looks like when it's done. This has been baked, and I use pomegranate seeds because I love that sweetness and that tartness at the same time. When you take that bite, everything just blends in so well with it. So this is my contribution. Again, my house smells so beautiful. It reminds me of growing up at home, and it reminds me of my mom. But I hope everyone tries this, and I want to thank everyone for taking time to join us today, and I feel very blessed to be a part of this group. And I thank every Food for Life instructor that is on here and taking time for their contributions. Thank you. And up next, we have Susanna, who's going to make a pumpkin pie. Take it away, Susanna.
Thank you. And oh my gosh, that looks so wonderful. My husband was just commenting, I make a homemade oat bread, and when we make bread again this week, that is definitely what we're going to be using it for. Today, my name is Susanna Dickman, and I'm from Evansville, Indiana. And you can follow me on eatplantsbewell.com to find out the journey my family and I took to become plant-based and what led me to become a Food for Life instructor. Today I'm going to make my favorite holiday dessert, and that is pumpkin pie. I'm so excited with this recipe because it is just easy, and I really like to make things easy. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pour in some milk, and you can use any kind of plant-based milk. Lately I've been into oat milk because I've been making my own, and I like to just make a double batch, and then I put it in little cupcake tins and freeze it. And then I just have it. And when I need milk for baking, I just thaw it out, and there it is. I'm going to put in, this has a combination of cornstarch, baking powder, salt, and pumpkin pie spice. And then I am going to put in the pumpkin puree. Now I used canned pumpkin today, but you could use, you can see my little pie pumpkins here. I like to buy pie pumpkins at the beginning of the season, and then I will bake them just like a squash, and I will process in the food processor to make the puree smooth, and then I will freeze them so that if I want to make pumpkin muffins or pumpkin pie during the year, I've got my pumpkin already frozen and already pureed, and it freezes well, and it's so easy to thaw out. All right, I'm going to process this for a little bit before I add my other ingredients. Oops. All right, there we go. It needs flour. All right, now I'm going to add some brown sugar. And this pie is a crustless pie, so it can be made gluten-free. And this one is going to be made gluten-free because I'm going to use rice flour, brown rice flour. You could use whole wheat flour if you don't have brown rice flour, but I like the brown rice flour in it, so I add that. The last thing I'm going to add is a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Okay, and then I'm going to process it again, and that will be it. No crust, but it really comes together. When you see the pie that I have finished, it really comes together in a nice, form, and it's going to be firm. So let me process this. Make sure all right, that should do it. And then it is done. And all I need to do is pour it in my pan. Let me move all my things over. Okay. There's my pie. To go along with this, today I'm going to make a macadamia nut whipped cream. I know macadamia nuts are more, they're probably one of the highest fattiest nuts, but again, you know, this is for a holiday, so we're going to put that on. I also like to make my own ice cream. I make ice cream with coconut milk, and I will use sometimes date sugar as a sweetener, brown sugar, brown rice syrup. But the pie is done. This is going to go in the oven for about an hour. And this is a dessert best made the day before. You want it to sit in the refrigerator overnight. Here you can see my finished product. All right. I'm going to make the macadamia nut whipped cream right now, but there is my pie. And what I love is it won't stick. I don't have to use parchment paper. I never put oil down in my pan, and it will come out just so easily. So let me move my food processor over, and we will make some of the macadamia nut whipped cream. which is very, very easy. Oops, I unplugged the wrong one here. Let me move that over. All right, so I'm going to use my Vitamix for this, but macadamia nuts are not that hard, so you can use just a regular blender. I did soak them for about an hour before I wanted to do this, just because it makes them a little bit softer. So I'm going to put those in. I'm going to put in a little bit of water. I'm going to use maple syrup as my sweetener. You can use agave nectar. You could, since you're going to be blending it, you can use something like date sugar, but I find maple syrup is just easy. And then again, I'm going to use just about a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. And then I'm going to process this, and it just tastes so good. After you process it, you want to taste it. And if you want it sweeter, you can add a little bit more maple syrup. It's up to you. All right, let me check it out and see how it looks. Oh, it looks perfect. Okay. Let me go ahead and put it in my bowl, and then we will put it on our pie, and yum. Okay. I haven't tasted it to see how sweet it is, but I've been averaging the 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. Again, I don't like things too sweet, and that's what I love about this pie. It has only a 1/2 cup of brown sugar, so it's not overly sweet. I'm really not, I don't know, since becoming plant-based, I find sometimes fruit is what that sweetness that I crave. But you can see how nice this looks, and so I'm just going to put a plop on my pie here, maybe a little bit more of a plop, but I hope you will try this pumpkin pie. Whenever I make this in classes, it always is a favorite of everyone, and people who thought, now I'm plant-based, I can't eat pumpkin pie, but yes, you can eat pumpkin pie. So thanks for watching. And next is Mark. He's in my hometown of Chicago. And Mark, take it away. I can't wait to see what you're going to do with Aquafaba. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
That little Aquafaba, isn't that crazy? Now you can't tell me that that does not look like egg whites, right? Stiff peak egg whites. Isn't that amazing? Aquafaba. So if we have anybody out there that doesn't know what Aquafaba is, well, you're going to learn everything you have always wanted to know, and we're afraid to ask about Aquafaba in the next couple of minutes here. But this is just a wonderful, you know what, I'm going to go backwards here because this smells so good. So this is a 1/4 cup of bean juice. This is a tablespoon of agave syrup and a teaspoon of the vanilla extract, right? I just put that all in there, and whip that up, and then you can cook it up to stiff peaks. This kind of got stiff peaks, but I'm gonna put it on some pumpkin pie real quick. So here's my wonderful pumpkin pie. Happy holidays to everybody.
What?
And we're just gonna flip some right on the top of that pumpkin pie. Could have whipped it a little bit more, but you get the idea. So how do you make aquafaba, and what the heck is it? So aquafaba is a viscous liquid. Primarily, people use it from chickpeas. So believe it or not, folks, you just get your can of chickpeas and get a quarter cup. I just made a little bit here. Get a quarter cup, and you want to strain it because sometimes the little husks and everything are in the liquid, and sometimes a chickpea drops in there. So you don't want the chickpea in. You want a clean bowl. You want a clean beater. You want to clean everything. And then we're gonna put this. Put my tablespoon of agave syrup. You know, agave is from the agave plant. Half the plant goes to the tequila plant. The other half of the plant goes to make agave syrup. So I love agave syrup. And you could use all different types of sweeteners. You want to use some raw sugar, maple syrup. I've actually made meringues with these in maple syrup. So I'm going to do a teaspoon of vanilla extract in that, and that's it. Now, Aquafaba was invented about 6 years ago. So here's the thing. Check this out. It was invented by a French tenor. Right, this gentleman, he was a cook. He also liked to cook, but he was a French tenor. He sang, and then somebody here in the U.S. picked it up and promoted it a little bit more. A gentleman who's a software engineer in South Bend, Indiana. Those of you that are familiar with South Bend, you know Notre Dame's in South Bend, and then I first heard of it back in 2018 when I was watching the Great American British Baking Show. And they had a whole episode, I think it was 2018, it was episode 7. The whole episode was vegan. And they were talking about Aquafaba and these beautiful meringue, Italian meringue cake. So it was just pretty amazing. But, it whips up just really lovely. And if you don't believe me, I'm gonna whip this up a little bit and watch how fast this froths up. You can already see it. You can already see it frothing, right? Now this takes about 10 minutes to get nice stiff tweaks. So it could sit there, and I actually left mine. I was playing with this a little bit yesterday, and I left it up a half hour, and it just it'll deflate a little bit. Then you just kind of whip it up, and it takes about 10 minutes altogether just to whip it. And you can see this goes wonderful, wonderful peaks. So check out Aquafaba. There's actually a couple of Facebook pages that I found. One of them is called, this is such a funny one, Aquafaba Vegan Meringue Hits and Misses is one Facebook page. The other one is What Fat Vegans Eat, F.A.T. Vegans Eat. And there's also an aquafaba.com website. So if you want to know more about Aquafaba, put it on those wonderful desserts that John made, that the wonderful pies that Susanna made. I've got my little pumpkin pie here with Santa Claus, and I'm going to taste my whipped cream. Again, play with this, have fun with it, enjoy vegan, because we become vegan for our health, but we stay because of all this wonderful food. Check me out at let'seatgreat.com. Happy holidays to everybody. Next up is my friend and colleague, Carolyn from beautiful Montgomery, Alabama. Take it away, Carolyn. Happy holidays, Happy New Year, everybody.
Hi, thanks, Mark. That looks really good, and it would be great on what I'm making today. So awesome, perfect timing. Okay, mine looks a little complicated. It's really not. So I'm going to talk you through every step. Okay, so one of the things that people always tell me when they've switched to a plant-based diet is, I can't have cheese anymore. That's the one thing I just can't give up is cheese. Well, we're having cheesecake, and I'm making it with a totally whole food plant-based set of ingredients. But I did want to point something out that I noticed at the grocery store the other day. Okay, there are a couple different kinds of plant-based cheeses in the store, cream cheeses that I saw the other day. Most of them, and traditionally what we've had since I've been eating plant-based for 11 and a half years now, Back 11 and a half years ago, there weren't a lot of choices. So there were a few, I'm not going to name any brand names, but if you looked at the ingredients, the main ingredients seemed to be oil, like some sort of palm oil or coconut oil, that kind of thing. So I was really pleasantly surprised the other day at the grocery store to find a couple of different ones, Miyoko's classic plain cream cheese and Kite Hill cream cheese, that neither one of them have any coconut oil in them. So I was really pleasantly surprised about that. One of them, it's basically just almonds, almond milk, enzymes, a vegan source of lactic acid, probably from beets, enzymes to get it to become cheesy, but they're vegan based enzymes. This one actually, I think, has mushroom extract. Maybe it was the other one, but there's like a mushroom extract, sea cultures, coconut cream in one of them, not in the other, but they don't have any coconut oil. So I was really, really pleasantly surprised about that. So if you have a, favorite cheesecake recipe, I mean, I haven't tried it, but I mean, you could try that out because they don't seem to have as many of the really bad for you ingredients in them. So that being said, what I'm making is they are mini pumpkin cheesecakes. You could also make them in a regular springform cheesecake pan if you want to. You're just going to increase the baking time a little bit. So these bake about 20 to 22 minutes. You might need to go up to about 30, 35 minutes. Check it, make sure it's set in the middle if you really want to make a whole cheesecake instead. But mini pumpkin cheesecakes, I figure if you're going to a holiday gathering, which you shouldn't be because we're in a pandemic right now, but if you do, and you're going to a socially distanced outdoor gathering, maybe you could have, these are individual servings, and that's what we're looking for, is little individual servings, making it a little safer. So have your hand sanitizer ready, be socially distanced, and have your little individual bites. Okay, so we're going to start with the crust. So we're starting with a cup of nuts. I have 2/3 cup of nuts and 1/3 cup of walnuts. You could play with that if you want to, just as long as it makes a cup, okay? If you don't like pecans, then just make it all walnuts, that's fine. And I have a food processor with the S-blade in it. So I'm adding 2/3 cup of pecans, 1/3 cup of walnuts. I have dates. So these are medjool dates. And this is about a cup of medjool dates. It's about 10, but depending on the size of your date. So I buy the dates that still have the pits in them because they tend to stay moister that way. And then right before I use them, I pull the pits out. So if you get the big medjool dates, and I buy them in really big bins from Costco, but and I pull the pits out. So this is about a cup. So I'm going to drop those in. So this is just a date nut crust, but it has one special ingredient, just a 1/4 cup of unsweetened shredded coconut. All right, and the kind I use is this one. So it's totally unsweetened and shredded and organic. So that's nice. And then if you want to, you could use a little pinch of salt. Remember, salt is optional in this. And then I'm just going to whirl it up, make a nice dough out of it. If it doesn't seem to come together right away, you could add a few teaspoons while it's running, just a little bit of water to help it pull together into a dough. So all you're really trying to do is get it to stick together, which the dates really help with that because they're very sticky. So I'm going to take this big, dangerous blade out of here and set it over to the side. Okay, so I'm going to dump all of that into a bowl and show you how very easily it sticks together. That back on here. Turn it off. Okay, I'll slide that over here. Okay, so we have this big bowl of chopped up everything. All right, so it's dates, nuts, coconut, a little pinch of salt if you want to. You don't have to. And you could use other nuts if you want to try with cashews or sunflower seeds. You know, change it up as long as it equals to about a cup. Okay, so the easiest way to do this to me is to make it into a big ball. So now, and it's kind of like, I think it was John who was talking about playing with putty and Play-Doh earlier. So it's kind of like that. So it's one big ball. And then because I'm making little mini cheesecakes, I'm going to pull it apart in about half, pull each half into another half, and then pull each one of those into 3 parts. So I'll have about 12 equal sized little balls. The easiest way to do that really is just to roll it into a little log, and you can just kind of eyeball it and pull it apart into thirds. Okay, I hope that one needs to be in half. It's a big one. And then pull this into thirds, and I'm going to have 12 equal sized little balls. Almost there. Okay. And then what I do is make it in this really neat pan my mom gave me, which is actually a mini cheesecake pan. And so it has removable bottoms in it, which is hard to show, but these little discs in the bottom come up. So it makes it where you can push it straight up through and pull the little cheesecake out, kind of like a springform pan where the sides remove from it. This has little bottoms that press up. You can take a spoon handle or something and just press the little cheesecake straight up out of it. So I make it in this because it is more traditional, but, and I love this pan. So thanks, Mom, because I know she's watching. So I've been putting it to really good use. And then I'll show you making just one of these. So you could also, I wanted to point out, use a silicone. So this is a really bendable silicone muffin pan. And this would be an easy way to make them as well, because then you could just press it from the bottom and push it up and take it out. Another way to do it would be in a regular muffin pan, and then just put a paper liner in it, line it with parchment paper or strips of parchment paper, or just a regular muffin pan liner. So what you'll do with each one of these little balls is just press it into the bottom of the little pan, into each little cup, and then across the bottom and up the sides part of the way. So I am not going to make you watch me do all 12 of these, but so I have it pressed into this one. So I've just made a little liner out of it basically. Okay, so all 12 of those balls will be pressed into that pan, and then we're going to make the filling. So for that, I'm going to use my Vitamix. You could also use a food processor if you want to, but I'm going to use this because it gets it really smooth and creamy. One of the main ingredients, instead of using that store-bought cream cheese, is cashews. So, and I know I'll get the question, can I use something besides cashews? So one of the things, I taught a class last month and I had somebody who was allergic to tree nuts. So I think you could probably replace it with sunflower seeds, the unroasted, unsalted kind, like raw sunflower seeds. And I think that would probably work. I haven't tried it, but I do think that that could probably work in place of the cashews if you happen to be allergic to tree nuts. Because most people who are allergic to tree nuts, from what I understand, can still eat seeds like hemp seeds and sunflower seeds. So, all right, so I have a cup of pumpkin puree. And as we previously talked about, you could make your own pumpkin puree from a whole sugar pumpkin. Just cut it in half, pull the seeds out, roast it until it's tender, and then puree it in your food processor, and you have this really nice pumpkin puree. You could also use store-bought, just organic canned pumpkin puree. So we're putting 1 cup of pumpkin puree. And then the not sunflower seeds, the cashews that I have are the whole organic, unroasted, unsalted. Don't think they're actually technically raw, because actual raw cashews apparently have something that makes you very sick. So I think all cashews we buy that we think of as raw are really just unroasted, unsalted, but they have already been cooked in some way to remove, I think it's some sort of, somebody probably knows more about this than I do, but some sort of poisonous sap that's on the outside of them that we can't eat. So I have taken those organic, they're unroasted, unsalted cashews, and I've boiled them for about 10 minutes. And so they're nice and soft. I'm going to add those and drain them really well. I have a half a cup of coconut sugar. So this is not coconut brown sugar. So this is not refined sugar. Coconut sugar is lower on the glycemic index. It won't spike your blood sugar quite as fast. It's not quite as sweet as refined white sugar, but it is delicious and nice and sweet enough that it's, you'll know it's sugar. So we have a half a cup of the coconut sugar. We have 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. So you could buy a bottle of pumpkin pie spice, or you can make it yourself with just cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger. I have the recipe. So the recipe has been already added to our list of comments. If you want to look at it, it's also on our Facebook page. So take a look at that, because I put on there a recipe for making your own pumpkin pie spice. So I just make my own and keep it in the cabinet. So 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1/2 cup of a plant-based milk. So you could use a light coconut milk if you want to. I'm using my homemade almond milk, and it's unsweetened almond milk. There we go. And then if you want to, you can add, oh, I'm sorry, the most key ingredient here, I'm forgetting, 1 tablespoon of tapioca starch. You could also use potato starch, cornstarch, arrowroot powder, any of those starches that help things get firmer when they're baked. So this is tapioca, organic tapioca starch, and just a pinch of salt. And then I have my lid here, so I'm going to whirl this up, and you're going to want to let it whirl for quite a while to get really smooth and creamy. And then stop to scrape down the sides as you need to. I should have put my little plunger thing in here. But it'll get really smooth, creamy, and liquidy, so it's not going to thicken up until after you bake it. Okay, need to give that one more whirl. Okay, it's not quite creamy enough yet for me, but what I would do then is pour it into the individual containers that already have that date nut crust lining each of the parts of the pan or your muffin pan. You may have some leftovers of this, and that is fine, because when it sits in the refrigerator, it will thicken up a little bit, and it is delicious to take a really nice apple, like a Granny Smith or a honey crisp apple, slice it up and just dip it and use it as a pumpkin cheesecake dipping sauce. So I have some in the refrigerator right now, which I feel like my husband will probably run over and grab it when we're done. Okay, and then to top off these beautiful little pumpkin cheesecakes, we are going to make a salted caramel sauce. And most of the time, caramel sauce has dairy in it. Mine doesn't. It has dates, of course. So I have, again, a cup of dates. I'm going to drop those in here. And the pits have been removed. This is about 16 dates, actually. So you want 16 of these nice, big, plump medjool dates, and have already had the pit removed. We have a cup and a quarter of unsweetened almond milk. So you want to start with about a cup, and then add more if you want it a little bit thinner. So that's really up to you, but I'm going to do I like it a little bit thinner, so I'll do about a cup and a quarter. And then scrape that in. And so this is a salted caramel sauce. You can leave the salt out if you are watching salt in your diet. Oh, and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. But salted caramel seems to be kind of a big fad right now. So I've noticed there's salted caramel ice cream and salted caramel everything. So that's why I came up with a salted caramel sauce. So just a little, you can add as much salt as you want to into yours to give it that kind of salty flavor, or leave it out. That's perfectly fine too. So we're going to whirl that up until it's smooth and creamy. And then I would probably just keep whirling that up for quite a while. But I take it and pour it into a container like this one. So a little squeeze bottle that's already filled with some right now. And it's a delicious sauce you could put over some of your plant-based ice cream, or pretty much drizzle it on a lot of the things like Susanna's pumpkin pie. You could you could put it on all kinds of things. So, and then one last little thing you could do to decorate it. I'm going to show you my little cheesecakes. All right, so this is a whole tray of already made mini pumpkin cheesecakes, and you drizzle the caramel sauce over it. And then if you want to make it even prettier, you put some candied pecans on it, or other nuts if you don't like pecans. And the recipe is on our Facebook page, and also on this the list of comments that are going by right now. So, and I don't want to have to stand here and show you how to do that. It takes a little bit of time. It's maybe 5 minutes. It's fast and easy, but it's ingredients like coconut sugar, a little maple syrup, a little water, a little pinch of vanilla extract, and then you cook it, stir it, and then when it comes out, they're dry and hard, so they're candied because of the cooked sugars on it. I think I saw a question earlier where somebody asked if we could replace date paste, and in a lot of recipes you can, but not in the candied pecans, because it's the cooked sugar that hardens up and makes them candied. And I don't think the date paste would do that, but you could possibly replace some of the coconut sugar in this recipe, in the filling recipe. You probably could do that in the puree that's going in the middle of your cheesecake. So, and then we just sprinkle those on top, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful, delicious dish that I made for Thanksgiving for my family, and they are my toughest critics, and they all liked it. So I'm hoping everybody else will like it. I want to point out that our next live cooking demo will be January the 9th. We will be doing so many soups and stews. We'll be making winter soups and stews. January 9th, same time, same place, same bat channel. So come and join us for that. And I believe I'm last but not least, and we're going to do Q&A now.
Okay, great. That was wonderful, Carolyn. So we're in our Q&A period, and I invite people on Facebook who are watching us live to share questions. And I know some of us are monitoring that. And while we're waiting for that, I had a question for each of you. I wanted to, before we started with questions, mention that my fruit compote, even without the chocolate, was plenty sweet. It tasted great with absolutely no refined sugar, and my daughter agreed. So on the other hand, I made some for my neighbors, and they liked it, but they thought it was a little tart. So if you don't want to add any sweetener and you do have a sweet tooth, just add less cranberries. Okay, so I had a question that came up for Jean and for you. And by the way, happy birthday to Jean, and happy birthday. The question came up about date paste. Instead of using brown sugar, could you use date paste?
A really good question. I've never tried that. I would say that go for it, try it. I'm all for trying new things and not really sticking to the original recipes. The only warning would be that if you use a date paste, try to ensure that the consistency of the chestnut puree is still like Play-Doh. You don't want it runny. You don't want it too hard. It's just, you just want it wonderfully creamy. And you maybe saw me during the video. You can take it in your hand. It doesn't really even stick. You can roll it nicely and form these little patties that you put in the middle of the cupcake liners. So go for it, try it, and please do let us know how it turns out, because if it's good, I'd like to give that a try myself.
Great. There was a question for you, Karen, about the powders you were using. So where do you get them? Can you make them yourself? And they add nice color. And of course, they add some nice nutrition. So can you talk a little bit more about the powders that you used?
Yeah, so I had a chlorella powder, But that's, you don't have to use that. Any green powder, you can get spinach powder.
There was a question from you, Karen, about the powders you're using. So where do you get them? Can you make them yourself? And,
Sorry, I hear the question
color.
again.
And of course, they have some nice nutrition. So can you talk a little bit more about the powders that you used?
Okay. Okay. Chlorella powder. I don't know where the echo is coming from, but yeah, I would say the chlorella powder, spirulina powder, spinach powder, even any kind of greens powder. I have some from Sun Warrior. Any brand. There's no specific brand. You can get them at a natural grocery or online, Amazon or different health food sites will have those. And the beet powder, the beetroot powder. There's a lot of different brands of that. And yes, you can make it yourself with the. I've used freeze-dried raspberries. I think it's called Just Raspberries, and they're really crunchy and easy to powder. And I just put it in a little coffee grinder. Any red dried fruit would work for that. But if there are more questions about that, I'll answer that. But I just wanted to say, with Jonan's recipe, instead of substituting date paste, if people could maybe find date sugar, which is just dried, and then it would not alter the texture of her recipe.
Great.
Good idea.
So before Cody, I wanted you to talk a little bit about cooking with kids. I know something about that, but I think you probably know more because you have more kids than I. Although I work in the schools, so maybe not. But you know a lot about working with kids. Before I ask you that, I wanted to mention that our next show is about soups, but our next show with the kids is next week. So Cody's children, my child, and we have one other, Ella Rodriguez, her children will be presenting So Many Kids in the Kitchen, their own version of holiday desserts. And I have to mention that I've tried what my daughter makes. She made up a brand new dish, and it's amazing. It's so good and so simple. I think you'll really like her. It's called Apple Cobble. But I did want to mention before, Cody, you're talking about cooking with kids. I'm very excited that next week we have a special guest, and that's Brenda Davis. She's one of my favorite nutritionists. She's the friendliest and most wonderful nutritionist you could find, and so knowledgeable, so many books. She has a brand new book with a pediatrician called, what's it called? You'll remember, Cody. Nourish, called Nourish. And so we're so lucky she's going to be a guest on the show, and she's going to help with the Q&A and help with answering some questions. So Cody, can you talk a little bit about cooking with, you have 3 kids, and what's it like in your household with cooking with kids?
Well, yeah, I got, little Nora is 4, Ella just turned 9, and Ava is 11. And so they're different levels of cooking. So with Nora, we're just kind of whatever she's interested in helping out with. She loves the sweets, she loves the fruit. So whatever she wants to do, we have, cooking or cutting gloves for the kids so they can learn to actually cut with knives, but we have the gloves so they don't cut their fingers. And so they use those when the opportunity arises, and just introduce them to as many different types of healthy foods as you can as early as possible. My kids eat so many different foods that I've never even heard of when I was a kid. My diet was mostly the standard American diet, so I didn't get introduced to a lot of different things like the variety of fruits and vegetables that we eat now. There's just so many. And so my kids are getting such an introduction to all of these at an early age. So I'm hoping, it's really going to expand their palate as an adult as well. And hopefully, giving them these cooking skills is going to set them up for success down the road as well. So hopefully with their future children and families as well. So anyway, so Ava, of course, is more involved, Ava and Ella. So they do the So Many Kids in the Kitchen. Nora kind of pops in and tastes stuff and steals their ingredients from time to time. So she's a little bit of the comic relief, I guess you could say. You just never know what she's going to do. But it's so much fun. they're healthy. You know, they go for their pediatrician appointments, and we're very open and honest with him about their diet, and he's just, you know, happy as can be with their, you know, they're on the growth chart and they're according to what they need to be. They're not deficient in everything, so they're healthy little kids. So yeah, just get your kids involved. Let them do as much as they want to is very important, and they're going to try more and more different types of foods. So
there's a lot of evidence, and one thing we should mention is what we do is based on strong evidence. Physicians Committee, our nutrition is based on well-documented evidence, and so there's a lot of evidence that a plant-based diet is optimal, is very, very good for children and for all stages of life. We have handouts on these topics. Angelita, I really enjoyed your presentation, and you touched on looking at traditional dishes and making them vegan. And I was wondering if you could spend some time talking about a lot of traditional dishes actually were vegan, and then they went through a phase where all these animal products were added and then now became vegan again. So can you talk about that a little bit? Also, can you talk about, there was a question that came in for you about, can you use sourdough bread instead?
Well, I don't know about the sourdough bread, because it might give it that vinegary flavor, though, that vinegary undertone. But I mean, cooking is all about experimenting, you know, so try it. Why not? You might, you know, come up with something new. The traditional way of Mexican cooking, which I've been doing a lot of research on the Mayans and the Aztecs, is they very rarely used any animal products. Meat was more of something they would get once in a while. So they ate a lot of vegetables and herbs and leaves. So it's been interesting because what happened is when they brought those foods to the United States, they kind of had to change it up a little bit to fit the palate here, which they had to add egg and milk and cheese and flavor stuff with bacon. Because I know growing up, my mom saved the bacon fat, and that's what she would cook the eggs with. And trying to get away from that in the way that I'm trying to cook for my family, because that's what I specialize in Mexican cooking, and trying to get, well, not just my immediate family, but my cousins and all that, to try to taste the food without all the added fats and sugars and cheeses and all that stuff. You know, it's not been received very well, but once they taste it, they're like, oh, wow, you know, I can taste the different ingredients. So it's been challenging, but it's been very eye-opening to me, and that's why I continue to do a lot of research on how they used to cook with the way the Mayans and the Aztecs used to cook, because that's what I want to get back to, and that's when people were a lot healthier back then, and they lived a lot longer, you know, than they're living now, because unfortunately a lot of my Hispanic people, my family included, you know, suffer from diabetes, high blood pressure, and all these standard American diet diseases that come along with it.
We talk about the standard American diet, don't we?
Yeah. Hey, this is Mark. Can I piggyback on what Angelita,
Sure.
what you're saying there? You know, and this also kind of connects to somebody asked a question. I think it was Paula Proctor online asked a question about how do we all become vegans? And Angelita, you're really speaking to a big piece of that for me and in my family and any of my friends too. It's, you know, put it on their plate and let's try it, right? And this stuff tastes pretty good. And, you know, everybody has their own journey. And I think each of us, we probably can talk an hour about our own journey. And, you know, I've been talking a lot about this now in the holiday season with people because, in fact, I just had a class this last week, vegan cooking for the non-vegans. And, you know, it really, a lot of what I try to focus on with new vegans is focusing on foods that remind you of the things that you ate when you were on the standard American diet, you know. So for instance, you know, I make a really nice Satan roast, and it's got texture of meat, but it's all made from vital wheat gluten, and it tastes just like, you know, the holidays. You know, a green bean casserole that is totally veganized, doesn't have all that fat from the mushroom can of soup and cream and everything. And I think certainly all these desserts as well. So, you know, but getting people to experiment and trying things and realizing, hey, you know, this stuff's pretty good. I mean, that's one of the reasons I stay vegan, is because I've got more selections now. I'm healthier, and it tastes better, and I actually taste food. You know, I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, an exam room podcast. I think it was at the Thanksgiving, right before the Thanksgiving holiday, and I think it was Maggie Neola and Chuck Carroll. Maggie Neola is a PCRM registered dietitian, and Chuck Carroll, the weight loss champion. You have to check out the Exam Room podcast for those of you that are listening if you haven't heard it. But they were talking about turkey, and you know how they don't miss turkey. I really don't miss turkey because turkey really doesn't taste like a whole lot. It's dry. You know, it doesn't, you know. And when it comes down to it, it's about the seasonings, and it's about, you know, the sauces and how we prepare whatever food it is. So why not prepare something healthy? And it's a mindset, and it takes a lot. I mean, it took me about 24 years to become vegan. I was a pescatarian, eating fish and cheese for about 24 years. And then the last, coming up on 3 years now, I've been 100% vegan. So it's a journey for everyone.
Mark, while you're speaking, can you also answer these questions with Aquafaba? Why chickpeas, or do other beans or other products give you that kind of whippable product? And can you use what you did to make meringue cookies?
Yeah, so the real easy answer is yes, you can make what I made for meringue cookies. And I actually posted my favorite recipe as a reply to the question that was online, vegan meringues. I mean, you go to the Great British Baking Show, and it's 2018 season 7, and the whole thing's on vegan meringues and Italian meringues, and it's just amazing what they do. They're much more creative than I am, but the recipe is posted in the comments. So why use chickpeas? So chickpeas, because when you can whip up any of the viscous liquids from other beans, so red beans and black beans, but then you're going to get kind of a brownish, you know, meringue, if you will, or brownish cream or a blackish cream. You know, chickpeas is the one that people tend to go to because it whips up white, and much like egg white. So it's really you're aerating essentially the liquid and the proteins within that bean liquid that makes those wonderful stiff peaks. But it's just because of the color, and you know, none of those beans, as long as and also you really want to make sure that you're using low to no salt in beans as well, chickpeas particularly, because you don't want that salt in your meringues or in your whipped cream. But it's primarily the color, and you can use other ones. I haven't tried it, but apparently you can use them, and you can actually use them. You don't need to use it from a can either. Like we make chickpeas in a Instapot, and we'll use the viscous liquid from, you know, the Instapot after cooking those beans as well. So, but great questions, and try it, play with it. It like blew my mind the first time. I was like, "Are you kidding me? This is," and it's like I couldn't eat enough meringues the first time I made them.
I'm going to ask Suzanne in a moment to talk about oat milk, and maybe after all of us have gotten a chance to go, maybe Cody could talk about B12 in her family. But I did want to say something about vitamin B12. So there was a question. One of our attendees, Janice Zintig Dorn, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, it looks like you're interested in plant-based, but you have a concern about vitamins, I would encourage you to do some research with any number of researchers or websites, for example, nutritionfacts.org. And there's a lot of evidence that you gain a lot by being plant-based. And B12 is a problem for everybody, not just plant-based folks. And I think it was the American College of, can't remember which medical group has recommended for at least 5 years now that once you hit 50, you want to have a reliable source of B12 in your diet. B12 doesn't really come from animals, it comes from bacteria. And in the old days, we would drink unpurified water. We would drink water from a river or a creek, and there'd be little bits of B12 which would be made in the digestive tract of a fish, for example. Or we'd eat an apple and maybe a bird would leave a dropping on the apple, and we'd get a little bit of B12. You need 12 micrograms, 12 times 10 to the minus 6 grams. You need very, very little. So now that we're washing and cleaning our food so much, most of us, meat eaters or not meat eaters, don't get enough B12. It's easy to get B12 supplements. My family takes tablets, and we try to remember, no, actually we take a spray and we try to remember to do that just about every day. So B12 is important. The downside of not having a B12 is you can have nervous damage, and it can cause problems in your brain, for example. So please, no matter what your diet is, please do take a supplement. And maybe Cody in a few minutes will talk more about B12 and her family. But Susanna, can you talk a little bit about oat milk? So you were talking about one of your ingredients you use. You said you are enamored recently by oat milk. And I think you said you make your own oat milk. So can you talk a little bit about that, how to make your own oat milk, and what are the benefits of oat milk versus, say, soy milk or rice milk?
Sure. Well, the main reason that I make my own oat milk is because I have a son with a tree nut allergy, and I know almond milk is always the go-to. We use soy milk, and it's just expensive. You know, I like buying the brand that just has organic soybeans and organic water. So I've started making my own oat milk just because oats, and I do use organic oats, they're so easy to get. You know, I can go to the big box stores and buy a huge bag of organic oats. And I've actually, the first way I learned to make them, I didn't like as much because it was kind of, no matter how many times I rinsed it with the milk bag, it still had this kind of slime factor. So I've recently learned a new way to make it. So what I do is I use a cup of oats to 4 cups of water, filtered water. And you want to make sure that the water is cold, really, really cold. So what I will do now is I will put my 4 cups of water in the fridge in a container overnight so that it gets really cold. And I don't soak my oats. When I soaked my oats before, I found that it did get too slimy. So I don't soak them. I use organic, whole, rolled oats. And I just put them in my Vitamix and blend them. And again, you don't want to blend. The longer that you blend, the more slime you will get. And that's okay. You know, when I make it and there is that, you know, and I say slime, but there's the sediment. I then use a milk bag and I'll siphon it through, but I don't, even if I've made it and it has a little bit, you know, it's a little bit thicker, I go ahead and freeze it. And I love using it for baking. I just found it got really expensive to keep using soy milk for baking. We bake a lot and it's just been my go-to, but it's really, really easy. 1 cup of oats, 4 cups of cold water, process for just a little bit. And it stays in the fridge about 3 days. Freezing it is just the best thing to do. Freeze it in little ice cubes. And, you know, if you want to add it to a smoothie, if you want to use it for a baked good, but try it, experiment with it. It's a cheaper way to get a plant-based milk.
That sounds great. I've never made my own oat milk. I've occasionally bought it, so maybe I should do that sometime. It's so easy to find so many kinds of milks.
It's
Finally,
super easy too, Dylan. It's very easy. But one thing I wanted to point out, I strain mine through a nut milk bag too. You don't ever want to squeeze the nut milk bag to get it to go through faster, because that also makes it slimy. So just let it drain, be patient.
And one thing I would add too is if you are on a budget, you don't need to get a nut milk bag. You can go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever hardware store and get a paint thinner bag for literally, we buy them in quantity, I can't remember, but it's like $1 and it lasts for a long time.
Yep.
Cheap ways to do that.
Tip, Dilip.
And I-
I've heard that too. That's a great tip.
And I know there was a question about what to do with the grounds, and I'll let somebody, I have some answers to that, but I'll let somebody else answer that. But before we do that, Carolyn, you're the last one. I wanted to just have a couple follow-up and then we'll throw it open to general questions. But a question came up for you about the names of the cheeses, for example, Mayoko's, and also about milk and almond milk. Can you talk more about almond milk and tell us the kinds of commercial cheeses that you've used, vegan cheeses?
I really haven't used a huge amount of them because most of them have coconut oil in them or other like palm oils and saturated fats. But the two that I found that I showed earlier were Kite Hill and Miyoko's. So both of those, neither one of them had any coconut oil. So I was actually really surprised at that when I read the ingredients, because there's other ones out there. And in fact, I just went to the grocery store yesterday and looked at them. We have a Whole Foods, unbelievably, in Montgomery, Alabama. And so I was at Whole Foods and looked at all the different kinds of vegan cream cheeses. And those two were the ones that I found that didn't have any questionable ingredients. I was really pleasantly surprised at how few ingredients there were and that there weren't any added oils. So of course almonds have fat in them, and they did use thickeners like in one of them it was a mushroom extract as a thickener, and in one of them I want to say it was like xanthan gum. But you find xanthan gum if you buy a container of vegan ice cream or something, there's going to be xanthan gum. It's a thickener. You can buy xanthan gum on Amazon. It is a plant-based ingredient, but pretty processed too. So I don't use things like that very often, but yeah, those were the two more impressive cream cheeses that I thought that I saw. Also, I saw the question about almond milk too earlier, wondering what to do with the leftovers of the pulp, because in oat milk you don't have leftovers. It's strained. Well, it is kind of strong. Yeah, I guess you do. But yeah, because it's strained through that nut milk bag. But with almond pulp that's left over, you can take it and spread it out on sheets and put it in your oven at a really low temperature, let it get completely dry. And then you have almond pulp. You can add it to smoothies. You could, really add it to smoothies or a few tablespoons into some baked goods. It's going to give you a little boost of protein and fiber in your smoothie or your baked goods, but you can just keep it in the freezer. So dehydrate it and keep it in the freezer.
So I wanted to add to that too. So another ingredient you might see is, I don't know how to pronounce it, gellan gum, Gellan.
I think it's gellan gum. Yeah, I've seen that too.
And I highly recommend looking into the Vegetarian Resource Group, VRG. They have a magazine. Locally, I run a vegetarian group, and everybody who's a member gets a free subscription, Vegetarian Journal. And it then comes out, I think, every other month. And they had a very nice article on gellan gum. It is vegan. One thing I also wanted to mention is we went through years ago a period of making almond milk regularly. That was one of the things my wife would do. She would make the almond milk, and what she would do is she would take the remaining grounds. We would run the almonds through several times, and then what was left we would push into a pie pan and make. My wife was going through a period where she really enjoyed raw food, so she was making raw cheesecakes, vegan cheesecakes, so it makes a good pie shell. Cody, could you answer the question about B12? And I know you've been also watching the Facebook stream. Can you also, after talking about how you use B12 in your family, and of course, tell us about your background in the medical profession, and then maybe you could start posing some of the questions we're getting on Facebook.
Yeah, so since I have become vegan and my children transitioned after me and my husband as well, we do take a vitamin B12. And I agree with everything you said, Dilip. It's important for your nerve health. And we do a daily supplement. And, there's the spray. There's all sorts of different forms available. And it doesn't matter which form it is. And if it's a higher dose, you could take it every other day, or you could do it once a week, and it doesn't matter. So it's okay to do that. At least that's the last I heard, is okay to do that. So, and I'm excited to have Brenda on our show next week. So I'm sure we'll have more questions about that with kids as well. So I've been a nurse for 18 years, as a surgical nurse for about 8 years of that, and then 11 years as a nursing instructor in the Omaha and Lincoln areas. And I really enjoy that. It's a way to help educate patients and my nursing students about the power of nutrition. And I've only been whole food plant-based for about 3 years. Before that, I was, standard American diet, eating what I thought was healthy, what was, what we were told was healthy, by the, the website from the government, what you see, and I'm from rural Nebraska. So as you know, what Nebraska is known for is a lot of beef, so I grew up on that, grew up in a hunting community as well. So I was exposed to a lot of different types of animal products. And so when I transitioned, I still like those savory flavors, but I find great other recipes for it. Let's see. So I do the seitan and the tofu, and I might add like liquid smoke to it to get those great seasonings, and it's just been awesome. There's so much different types of foods out there, especially now. I mean, you got different types of meat substitutes, and we don't use a ton of that as far as like the processed stuff, because those are still really like high in fat. But like I said, I make some really great air fried tofu, and I did that on our tofu show a while back, and it was so much fun, so easy, and we've all done some great demonstrations of some of these good substitutes. So you do have to watch out for those commercial products. I mean, they're great there for a transition or an occasional food, but as far as everyday, it's pretty high fat content, so you have to watch out for that. And the kids still kind of like the some of those transition foods as well, and that's fine. We don't do it every day. So let's see, what was the other thing you wanted me to talk about, Dilip?
You were watching the Facebook feed, so what questions did you see that we could see who could answer?
So I think there's a question for Carolyn. I don't think you've answered it yet or knew about it. How long does your salted caramel last in the fridge?
Yeah. So because there are no preservatives in it, it doesn't last all that long. I would say about a week. In fact, this one that I made for Thanksgiving is starting to taste a little sour. So it's probably time to throw it away, and I'll refill it with the one I'm making today. So it's I would say about a week, and you'll know it's going bad when it starts to just taste sour instead of salty.
Others who are watching the Facebook feed, I know Mark, you've been watching too.
Yeah, so one person asked about figs, and people talk a little bit about figs and how we use figs in vegan cooking, and can we substitute figs, and all about figs. So who wants to take that? Anybody?
I can talk a little bit about figs if anybody. I don't have that much expertise, but I do have a fig tree.
I
have 26 fig trees.
Yeah, Jonan has a bunch of them.
So Johnny, you should say something as well. Let me mention, fig trees are so easy, at least here. I'm in North Carolina, zone 7B, I think, or 7A by the USDA standard, by the USDA, what's it called? How they break up the zones. It's grown from, I brought it home in the car, and now it's huge. It's almost, I think it's taller than my house. We actually have to prune it back. So what I do with figs, and on the top of my head, I can't remember all the nutritional benefits. I bet they're high in potassium, but I know they're going to have some good phytonutrients. They taste great. I love them right off hand, and just rinse it and just pop it in your mouth. But I sometimes grill peaches. So I cut them in half and I put them on a cast iron pan for maybe 2 minutes, and it really brings out, it caramelizes the sugars. It tastes wonderful. And sometimes I'll make my vegan ice cream. We talked about that in our dessert show. All I do is I take, for example, frozen peaches or frozen mango or strawberries, and I blend it with a high power blender with a little bit of a vegan creamer or a little bit of a vegan milk. And then I serve that, and I put the grilled figs on top. So I like that. Janan or anybody else, can you say something about figs?
Well, I like figs raw as a fruit, just to eat them. They're very sweet, and I'm just Googling the nutrition facts, it says it has actually very low glycemic index. It's 4, even though they're very sugary tasting, but they're very, I would think, and I'm getting there, that they would have a lot of fiber. Yes, indeed. Just one large fig has 7% of your daily requirement for fig, but that's the probably the food pyramid type of requirement. That's lower than the physicians committee's recommended 40 grams per day. They're very high in vitamins and minerals, so they're full of nutrition for you. And they're really filling. When you eat one fig for a snack between breakfast and lunch, you don't get hungry again. I like doing desserts with figs. You said, Dilip, I think that you cook them.
Yeah.
But one of the traditional ways of eating fig desserts for us is that you take a fig and you make it even more energy and nutrition bomb. You put some walnuts in it. So there you go. If you want like a superfood and really a lot of energy, figs with nuts inside, they're really delicious. And figs definitely are much better than fig Newtons. I had American friends come and visit us here in Italy, and they saw ripe figs on our trees and they were afraid to touch them. They're like, we don't like figs, because all they've had were dried figs and or figs that had been picked not ripe, because once ripe, they're really soft and they go bad rather quickly. So for commercial purposes, they're picked not at their peak. So they're harder when they come to the supermarket. That's what they had eaten. So once they picked one from the tree and they ate it, they were completely converted. So I'd say the favorite way to use figs is to eat them fresh.
And Shannon, there was, I'm reminded by Cody, there was a question earlier about chestnuts in your chocolate chestnut surprise. You'll have to pronounce it again, the marron di guise. You'll have to pronounce it. But there was a question, what if you don't have chestnuts? Can you substitute some other ingredients?
That's a really fun, I think, question. I would really like that person to try it and let me know. I've never done it, but why not? If you can get your get almonds to blend into a creamy but Play-Doh like consistency, so that it would stay in that shape and have the chocolate poured over and keep its integrity, let's say, I think it would work well, because almonds and chocolate are really good friends. I think that's a wonderful idea. I just have never done it. So one of these days, maybe I'll try it. And if the writer who asked that question would try it and let me know, I'd also appreciate that. They can drop us a note on our Facebook page.
Just a couple more things. We'll try to wrap up in a few minutes, and we appreciate everybody who's joined us and those who will see it later. The show will continue to be available on Facebook, and our shows eventually end up on Plant-Based Network. I've requested that we publish this soon before end of the year, so that you can see the holiday recipes before the end of the year. But I see there was one or two more questions, and then I wanted to have a couple of us share a few more thoughts. But I know one person threw in Harriet Shaham. Harriet, you asked, can anyone recommend a good gingerbread recipe? And I'll in a moment see if somebody can. I also wanted to mention Mitzi Craney talks about Miyoko. Miyoko Shinner is awesome. I've met her and I a number of times. I know her. She did a cooking demonstration for Food for Life instructors actually 2 years ago, I think, at our annual conference. And she makes amazing all vegan dishes, butters and cream cheeses, many dishes. These tend to be, and Mitzi pointed out that she's been using oats, and I recently bought her butter from oats. It was actually quite good. So our suggestion, our approach with plant-based eating isn't a zero fat approach, but it's a limited fat approach. And so what I suggest is, if you like butter on your toast, which I do, then I do keep some Miyoko's butter on hand. Some people like margarines like but I try to be mindful that we're looking for no more than 10% fat calories. So if I choose to use a little vegan butter, then I'm mindful of other things that may not have as much fat. So can anybody recommend a good gingerbread recipe? We host here in North Carolina, the country's biggest vegetarian Thanksgiving, and it's all vegan, and we've been doing it for I think 26 years or something like that. And we have this amazing pastry chef, and the line just goes on. There's like dozens and dozens of vegan dishes, and one of the things she always has is wonderful gingerbread cookies. So I enjoy hers, but I've never learned to make my own. Can somebody talk about what it means to be a Food for Life instructor? What is Food for Life, and what do we do? Mark, you want to talk about that?
Sure, I'll be happy to talk about that. So I'm actually a relatively newly minted Food for Life instructor. I was licensed by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine to be able to provide nutritional education and cooking classes. I mean, they're primarily cooking classes, and all of us on this show are licensed by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. So we all offer many classes that do a little bit, each class does a little bit of education. You get some wonderful handouts, material, access to the latest research, and then a cooking demonstration. And then you get those recipes and the ability to attend those classes and ask questions and really get some ideas. I think one of my big focuses as I continue to move into the space of the Food for Life instructor is being able to be there for people as you transition, because this is a big move. I mean, we are inundated in the media and in our personal individual lives with that standard American diet, and it's a big adjustment for folks to move into veganism. And I think through the classes we also create that community and that connection with each other, that support network. I see my students that are the most successful have at least another person in their life that is going on the journey with them, be that a family member, a friend, a significant other, a partner, what have you, a child. Food for Life, it's a great program in that Dr. Barnard and his team, Dr. Neil Barnard's the medical director and founder of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, also makes this information very approachable and accessible for lay people. The way he describes in all the sessions, just about all the sessions, you have a video, you see a video from Dr. Barnard or one of their registered dietitians, and they describe nutrition and the biological processes of the body in very approachable, accessible terms. So one of my favorite things to talk about when we do the diabetes class is the intramyocellular lipids, which sounds like a mouthful, but is basically the fat that's stored in the muscles, in the cells that keep the insulin out of the muscles, right? And I'm sure Cody can go on very, very succinctly about this, but the videos and the graphics and everything really help us understand what we put in our body affects this entire thing, called our system, our biological system. So
I agree with all you said. A question came in by Janice Zintig-Dorn. How long does it take to become certified? So I wanted to mention that I feel so privileged to be among all of you guys here. Karen, Susanna, Cody, Jean, and Carolyn, Angelita, Mark, and and the others who aren't on this particular show, as well as all the Food for Life instructors. There's an amazing amount of knowledge. When I can't answer a question, then many others can. It's a pretty selective process, and to become certified, you have to submit a video that shows you know how to teach cooking. You have to be vegan, and you get a background check, and then if you're selected, and we recently found out, we asked actually at headquarters, and I don't want to share the number, but it's less than half of people who apply. I know people who applied a few times before they were selected. But once you're in, it's amazing because you get all this training. We get state-of-the-art training and what's the most recent information about nutrition. We have monthly teleconferences. Every year we have a conference. So when we get asked questions in our classes, then if we don't have the answer, we can usually get the answer within a day or so. And we insist on it being evidence-based. So we share information that is well documented, and that's been shown to be true. We have classes that are for kids. I teach in the school systems. I teach children from kindergarten. I focus mainly on K through 4, but I have taught as old as 7th, 8th grade, and 9th grade. So we do have classes for children, and then we have classes to keep you in good health, like our Kickstart Your Health keeps you in good health, helps you maintain good body weight. But then we also have classes that help you if you are dealing with a health condition like diabetes or cancer or heart disease. It turns out that the evidence is very strong that it seems too good to be true, and we always ask people to check it out. But and we're not talking about veganism, by the way, because potato chips and French fries, I mean, if you occasionally eat that, that's one thing, but we are talking about whole food plant-based, which is even more particular. It's eating food in as close a way as possible to the way Mother Nature grew it, and watching your fats. So whole food plant-based eating, vegan whole food plant-based diet with limited fats has been shown to keep us in good health and help us with longevity. There have been studies, for example, by the Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists. They have many, many vegetarians and vegans. And so they've done these longitudinal studies. So we have a lot of evidence that this is perhaps the best way to go. And we've posted some more links. Could somebody talk a little bit about, before we forget, I know at least one of you, was it Karen, who you were working on a dish and you said you would share with us when we were done. Did you finish your dish?
I haven't eaten them yet.
Oh, look at that.
Oh yeah, you can imagine like if you were giving trays of cookies, just put a red one and a green one in the middle, or just put this on your dessert table.
Looks beautiful.
Thank you.
One thing that's important that I'd like us to talk about is the pandemic. So the pandemic, there's good and bad. There is something good about the pandemic. It got us together. And, I've never met any of you except Carolyn. I've had dinner with you a number of times, Carolyn, and I feel very close with each one of you. I feel like you're all good friends, and I'm just blessed to have you in my life. So that's a good thing about COVID, is it kind of launched our project. We've been doing this since May. So I wrote an article, but I'd like somebody else to pitch in, and I can also add after you do, about why what we're doing is even more important in this era of COVID. Would somebody like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I'm married to a doctor, so it's all around us all the time. So, I mean, he's at first, when this whole thing started out, he was actually working in the coronavirus clinic and doing testing. Now he's seeing patients in his office who have had coronavirus and are recovering and are having a lot of bad after effects from it, heart problems, lung problems, from blood clots, that kind of thing. And one of the things that Dilip mentioned, that we do training, we have the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine offers an annual international conference on nutrition in medicine. And we all attended virtually this year instead of being able to be together in Washington, DC. And I remember one of the things that really struck me the most, listening to Dr. Kim Williams, who was the previous head of the American College of Cardiology. And he was talking about why it is that people of color are dying more often. I want to say their risk of death from COVID is 30% higher or so then they're people, non-people of color, people, whatever that would be, like Caucasian people, I guess. So people of color have a higher risk of dying. And why is that? And we all kind of already knew. It's based on lifestyle and diet. And he said they actually did a study that showed that was totally, totally true, that it has nothing to do with the fact that, people have darker skin, have more melanin in their skin. That has nothing to do with why they're dying at higher rates. It has everything to do with diet and education about diet and access to healthy, affordable food that, is not from, a gas station, but food that's like fresh grown produce, fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing. Access to healthy food is really, really important. And that seems to be, to me, that's one of the biggest concerns I have about coronavirus, is when it impacts people, of color, and they don't have access to healthy, fresh, affordable foods, and they're eating more processed foods, they're going to get sicker. We already know that people who are overweight have a much higher risk. So the number one risk factor obviously was age with death, but the number two risk factor is being overweight. So, and my husband is just pointing out that, 400 years for people of color, 400 years of a history of slave food, and food that, was the remnants of stuff that other people, gave people of color to eat, became a culture. But unfortunately, a lot of that food is very unhealthy. And so trying to remake some of those dishes into healthier things, removing the fat back and the ham hocks and things out of it, but give it that flavor, with smoked paprika and liquid smoke and that kind of thing to help mimic those flavors, is really important. And we have a restaurant here that we finally have a vegan restaurant in Montgomery. And that's one of the things she's trying to do, is really cater to the African American community, to understand that eating plant-based and eating vegan can be delicious. And she's making things that, they're used to. And so she's really attracted quite a following with that. But I think that's the biggest thing to me, is that there's a connection between what we eat and our health. Obviously, we all know this as Food for Life instructors, but there's a connection between what we eat and our health, but then that is directly impacted by coronavirus. So if you've already got type 2 diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure, and then you get coronavirus, you're going to have a much worse time recovering from coronavirus.
I wanted to pick up a little bit on that briefly. So it was beautiful how Angelita talked about traditional foods and how they used to be much more plant-based, and now we're kind of, thanks to people like Angelita, there's a resurgence of going back to traditional foods. There's a group called, there's a group that runs, they're called Soul Vegetarian. They have these Soul Vegetarian restaurants, and their thesis is that before people were enslaved in Africa, they ate healthy plant-based foods primarily, and then they were given the worst of foods. So they argue that modern day racism, the food that's given is a form of modern day racism. And so maybe Cody turned me on to this wonderful broadcast, and maybe you could take a moment to both talk about that. I think it's called Slave Food. I've seen it a few times. It's excellent. And also talk about health disparities. So can you talk about those issues, Cody, please?
Yeah, so this is a show that is on Fridays, and it's an amazing show. They started this summer, and it was just incredible. They have great guests on there, and they really focus in on what Carolyn was talking about with the health disparities, as far as like she said, when they were brought over as slaves and they're fed, the food that the slave owners didn't want to eat. And so then they made this food really tasty and everything, but it was unhealthy for them. And it's just really interesting. They dive into that. They have great guests on there. They have doctors on there, chefs on there, and they really just dive into all this. And it really opened my mind. I didn't know all that, and it makes sense now, and just but the thing is you have to really kind of approach it real carefully. With me, especially being a white girl, I can't just go up and say, hey, don't eat that. It's not healthy, because you could hurt someone's feeling because this is their culture, this is their soul food. This is what their mother taught them how to make, and her mother taught her how to make. So it's just I really have, like thought about that. I can't, and I never did do that. I never went up and said, hey, that's unhealthy. But I have that in my mind when I'm thinking about how to approach people about that. You have to be very careful. I mean, there's just so much feelings and emotions in the food that people grow up with, and even the foods that I grew up eating. It's just, we had that turkey around Thanksgiving, and that was our thing. That was, what brought us joy. That was my soul food around Thanksgiving time. So but it's a great show on Fridays. You guys will have to look for it, and it's called Slave Food. So, and they do Facebook Live like we do.
Right.
Well,
go ahead.
I just posted the link, link to Slave Food, and I really thank Cody for introducing that to me. I don't get to see it every week, but it's an excellent show.
It's really, really good. Well, and also I was going to point out, Bryant Terry is a chef that I've met because we actually got him to come to Montgomery and speak at our Fairview Avenue Farmers Market, which is on a predominantly African-American side of town. And so we got him to come and speak and do a cooking demo for us a couple of years ago. And he is wonderful. And he has a couple of really good books out, but Bryant Terry, and I wouldn't say they're 100% whole food, plant-based, low oil, that he does use some oil, but they are all vegan for sure. And he's just a super, super nice guy. But his books are things like Vegan Soul Kitchen, things like that. I think he's got 3 or 4 books out now, and they're all really, really good. In fact, my very favorite baked bean recipe I always make every 4th of July is from Bryant Terry's cookbook. It's just delicious. So.
Yep, Carolyn, I was thinking the same thing. I posted a link to Bryant Terry's books. He's wonderful. I ran across him with his latest book, a cookbook called The Vegetable Kingdom, and I made a big, beautiful bean sandwich with broccoli rabe. It's just awesome. And then he did this tofu, baked tofu wrapped in collard greens, which was really wonderful too.
I've had that. Yeah, he was great. He actually showed at his cooking demo here, he talked about collard greens. He made a big batch of collard greens that one of the farmers at the farmer's market gave him. He washed them up and cut them up right there. And he said, you know what, you guys, like, we don't need to like cook them for 4 or 5 hours, just cook them for a little bit. And he showed, how to keep the nutrients in them, keep them nice and bright green and flavorful and beautiful. And they still tasted really good. And, he was great. I want to get him to come back because he was fabulous to do that for us.
Brian Terry is great. I've met him as well. And in fact, I invited him to come to North Carolina, and he almost did, but there were some mitigating circumstances to give some talks. There's lots of people in this space. I mean, Cody talked about slave food. There's people like, there's a woman, forgot her name, and it's called By Any Greens Necessary. And she talks about plant-based eating from an African-American perspective in particular.
Yeah, Tracy McWhorter. Yeah, 10,000 Black vegan women. Yeah.
Right. Then a little bit tangential to this, but there are nowadays we're talking luckily more and more about social justice issues, and there are people who talk about intersectionalism. Intersectionalism means, let's do good things for everybody. So how does, for example, and I know there was a comment by Dennis Bayomi, he said, let's not forget that diet is strongly connected to socioeconomics. I used to believe personal lifestyle was a key predictor, but systemic factors leading to personal lifestyle choices are closer to the root cause. And I think there's a lot of truth there, Dennis. Thanks for sharing that. And so intersectionalists talk about that if we're involved with activism, we want to, protect the environment, but let's also protect, and I know there was the animals, let's protect minorities who don't have the same choices others do. So a lot of times, I really believe in 1 + I'm a math teacher too, by the way. So, but I do believe in 1 + 1 = 3, because often when you help in one way, you help in many other ways too. So thanks, Dennis, for that comment. That was a good comment. Does anybody have any parting comments? Because we've gone, I think, a good length of time. I don't know if any more questions are coming in. I wanted to make a few thoughts about the upcoming shows, but I know one question came in, and it would be great to hear why all of us became vegan. And as I think Mark said, we could spend hours. But maybe one of us, can one of you, who wants to take a moment to share your story of why you became vegan? I think that would be fun.
I can go.
Okay,
This
John,
time.
why don't you?
I'm like Cody. It's only been about 3 years, just a little longer than 3 years that I'm eating plant-based. And my story is because I switched for health reasons. A good friend of mine who was already at the time a Food for Life instructor told me there's this great way of eating and it might help me with my chronic pain. And because by that time I had had about 5-6 years of chronic pain and modern medicine was not coming up with any solutions for me. It was MRIs, x-rays, painkillers, massages, hot water baths, whatever. Ice packs on my knees for years on end. And then after she told me about it, I said, okay. And Dilip, you're a math teacher and I'm an environmental scientist. So the scientist in me wanted to learn more. Therefore, I took the eCornell plant-based nutrition course immediately after my discussion with my friend. And I was sold. After that online class, I immediately started eating plant-based. And within 3 months, my, I guess, chronic inflammation and what was causing my pains went away. And after that, I just really started learning more and more and immersing myself in plant-based nutrition information and sharing this information with others. And eventually it led me to also getting certified as a Food for Life instructor and meeting all of you wonderful people. So in a nutshell, that's my story. Before that, I thought I was eating a really healthful diet, mainly like a Mediterranean diet, but still with meat and dairy and fish within it. Although I was eating a lot of veggies too and thinking, yeah, I have a really good diet. But now I have a really good diet, I could say. I guess being one of the older ones amongst you now, yesterday was my birthday, so I'm 60 and petrified of the number. It's really a big fat number and nothing felt like 60, you know, nothing was as scary anymore, but I've never felt better. So along with 60 came plant-based nutrition for 3 years, and I feel better than I felt when I was 45 or 50 or 55. So plant-based nutrition all the way.
Well, that's heartwarming to hear. It's wonderful. So unless there's any final questions, I did want to share that our next shows next Saturday is the kids. They're doing so many holiday desserts, just what we did, but their own take on it, which is I'm really excited about. That'll be lots of fun. And then we already have our next two So Many Cooks in the Kitchen events planned in January. I don't remember the dates. I think in each case it's early in the month. So we have So Much Soup, and we're going to be making soup and stews. I'm going to be working probably either with seitan. I make a very nice chunky stew with seitan and vegetables. I might make my carrot ginger soup. I have this interesting thing. I've known my wife, 16, 17 years, and I never repeat dinner for her. So she's had my stew exactly once. Although I guess she's had it in leftovers and she's had it as a side dish periodically. So it'd be fun for me to make that again. I used to make it more often before I met her, but ever since I've known her, I never repeat dinner. And that shows how easy it is to be plant-based. If I can do it, you guys can do it too. So January is soups, and then February is in time for Valentine's Day. It's so many heart-healthy dishes, and we're all trying to figure out what we're going to make. So those should be great shows. So does anybody else have any parting words?
Happy holidays and the best New Year's to everybody.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and see you guys here next week if you want to see our kids. Otherwise, see you in January. Happy New Year and happy holidays.
Happy holidays,
birthday,
everyone.
Donna.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.